In the last video, I showed you just how to create a very basic animation. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to render the animation into individual frames and then import those frames as a sequence of images back into the video editing section of Blender, and then to export a video video file that you can then upload to YouTube or whatever you want to do with it. So I created just a animation here, very basic 150 frames animation with the Suzanne head, which basically loops. Okay, so gonna first do a test render, kind of do it somewhere here. So just gonna take the file and render this image. Just take a look at how long it takes. So it's taking about let's see, like eight and a half seconds per frame. So I know that it's going to render. It's going to take eight and a half seconds times 150 to render the whole thing. So for the purpose of the video, I'm just going to change this to EV so it renders really quickly. And let's just see what happens when I render this. So that renders in less than a second. So that's what I'm going to do just for the demonstration purposes, so you get the idea of how this works and just memorize or have a reference of the steps you need to take. Okay, so let's go through the steps. So we know we're going to use the EV render engine. So if you click on the next button down on the right hand side of your screen, your output properties, I'm going to go ahead and leave this at 1920 by 1080 pixels because it's rendering so fast. And I'm going to render one frame to 150 frames. I'm going to set this to 30 frames a second. And under this section called output, we need to tell Blender where we are going to save our files. So I'm going to go ahead and click this folder so I can stay organized. I've created in my own set of my own setup here, a folder called Blender Animation Frames. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder in here, and this is going to be called Suzanne Flying Frames. So I know these are frames. Open that folder, and that's going to hit accept. So you can look here. The path is going to go to Suzanne Flying Frames folder. It's going to save 150 separate images there. Go ahead and leave the file as PNG. The depth is here, and all that stuff looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit render, and instead of render image, I'm going to render animation. So it's rendering all 150 frames. And we'll go ahead and let that finish. It should go really quickly. You can actually, if you weren't sure it was working, you could go locate that file while it's rendering and make sure the JPEG or the PNG files are going there, but I feel pretty sure that they are. So it's almost finished. It's at 100, and you can look at the top left, so it's showing you which frame it's doing, and it's almost done. Good. Okay, so I finished the render. I'm going to just save this Blender file. So always a good idea to save it. So the next step has to do with importing the files into the video editing portion of Blender, and that's why I saved this file, because I'm going to have to create a new file. I'm going to go to File, New. And instead of a general file, I'm going to choose a video editing file. So at the top of the screen, File, New, Video Editing. And when you open up the video editing file, you get basically something that looks very familiar to people who've used any kind of video editing software, a timeline, and you can drag in or you can import videos, audio, and animations that you've made. You could actually just use this for video editing if you wanted to. So in order to get our frames that we just made, you're going to hit the Add button right here in the time frame here, sequencer it's called. You're going to hit add, and you'll choose image/sequence. I'm going to go locate that folder. So I have a folder called Suzanne Flying Frames. Very important, hit the A button so that you select all. So you've got these PNGs you created, 150 of them. You're going to hit and make sure that they're organized in order by name so that they go in sequence, and hit A and say add image strip. Go ahead and play the timeline, and here's your animation being put together by frames. Good. So we have to do a couple of things here. So notice that the default is 250 frames and our animation is only 150 frames. So we're going to go up to the top right, and we're going to change our end to 150 frames instead of 250, and we want our frame rate to be 30 frames per second. This is all personal preference as far as frames per second. You can experiment with other things, but go ahead and for this purpose I'm going to do frames 1 to 150, 30 frames a second, and now when I play it, it should loop. Yes, so that's good. Now this is real important. Again, we're going to tell Blender where we want to save this file. In this case, I'm going to save it in a folder I made called Blender Movies. And I'm going to call it Suzanne Flying, and it's going to be saved in my Blender Movies, and I'm going to hit accept. So Blender Movies, and this time instead of PNG, I'm going to open this file format, and I'm going to tell it to save FFmpeg video. So that's a video file, and then I find for ease of use between Macs and PCs that when you click this encoding button, I'm going to change it from this one called Matroska to QuickTime. QuickTime is a format that can be read by both Macs and PCs easily. And then you can leave all this video default stuff the same. If video codec H.264 is good. Output quality I could change just to high quality, which I probably would. Encoding speed, you can leave that as good. Everything else looks good, so we're going to basically create a movie, and all you do is just like you did in the other render. Instead of render image, we're going to render the animation again. This time it's going to render it directly as a movie. So I'm going to hit render animation. Should go very quickly. Good. And now I can go locate it. I'm going to open up a folder. Oops, let's see. And I'm going to try to find it. Let's see. Desktop, Blender Files, Blender Movies. And I'm going to open up this one called Suzanne Flying. And oops. Go ahead and play it. And there it is. So you can take this movie and import it into YouTube. You should be able to figure out how to do that easily. Just create a YouTube account and upload the video and follow the instructions. It's pretty simple. That is it. So those are the steps in order to save out your animation and make a movie. All right.